The ghost town of the Smoky Mountains has long since been revived. So, is it worth your time to visit? And if you do, what should you expect? Welcome to Bear Facts, where we explore the Smoky Mountains one bear fact at a time. So, what is Elkmont Ghost Town, and are there actually ghosts there? Well, I'm sorry to say, but actual ghost stories are hard to come by, though there is the legend of the Daisy Town ghost, which centers around a mysterious figure who is said to wander the streets and woods of Elkmont, haunting the remnants of the old town. Some believe the ghost to be the spirit of a logger who met a tragic end during the logging heyday, while others speculate that it could be the restless soul of an early settler seeking closure for past injuries. But to be clear, there isn't much to back up that story. No, the real story is that Elkmont Ghost Town, which is actually originally called Daisy Town, was once a bustling community in the early 20th century, thriving due to the logging industry that dominated the region. However, as the logging operation ceased and the town's prosperity dwindled, Daisy Town became a ghost town. Its abandoned buildings served as an eerie reminder of its once vibrant past. If you aren't familiar with Elkmont, let me start with where it is before we delve into the town's history. Daisy Town is in the Smoky Mountain National Park, within feet of the actual Elkmont campgrounds. To get to this popular attraction and campgrounds, you need to get onto Route 441, either from Gatlinburg or Cherokee, or you can get there from Wares Valley off of 321. Elkmont is off of the Fighting Creek Road, which I'm not sure why they changed the name of the road for that short span, but it's a section of road that breaks the Little River Gorge Road in half, so it's really off of the Little River Gorge Road. The campgrounds are popular due to their location, which is close to Laurel Falls, Meg Falls, and the Sinks, just to name a few places. There are many great hiking trails, as well as bathrooms and even a convenience store open during the warmer months people can use at the campgrounds. Sorry, no showers. The Smoky Mountains are a shower-free zone. But what makes Elkmont truly unique is its story. And because there is far too much history to delve into in a full history of Daisy Town, I'm not even going to try. But what I will try to do is give an overview of why it was created, who was part of that creation, how it became a ghost town, and finally, what to expect when visiting the Elkmont Ghost Town of the Smoky Mountains. I'll arm you with enough information and history to make a trip more interesting. Well, hopefully. Daisy Town traces its roots back to the early 20th century when the Little River Lumber Company established a logging operation in the area. This sawmill town was originally named Elkmont after the abundance of elk in the region, which unfortunately are no longer as abundant. Though if you head down to Cherokee, you can find a growing repopulation effort happening there. The town saw a rise in popularity due to access to trains and transportation to and from Knoxville. And once the logging company saw that logging would eventually dry up, in true entrepreneur spirit, they changed directions from cutting and hacking away the mountains to inviting people to hunt and fish, to eventually tourism, selling off land to those who wanted to put a vacation home in. In 1925, the railroads were taken out, since the profits from logging and passenger transportations were sliding away. Also, that was the time the preservation efforts were put into full force, as it was also the time that the Smoky Mountain National Park was designated federal lands and now under their protection. An important fact to be aware of, the area might have been inhabited by early lumberjacks and common laborers, including farmers, hunters, and trappers, but Daisy Town was never really a poor man's town. In fact, its growth was attributed to wealthy business owners, politicians, lawyers, doctors, and socialites. It was a place where the wealthy went to socialize and escape the summer heat from the Knoxville area. In fact, the only reason Daisy Town really even exists was because of two social clubs, the Appalachian Club and the Wonderland Club. Both were powerful social clubs and were founded by prominent members of the elite crust of society who wanted a vacation area to enjoy in the hot summer months. As I already pointed out, in an effort to capitalize on lands and make more more money, the railroad company made an effort to increase tourism by deeding lands to the Appalachian clubs, as well as Charles Carter, the founder of the Wonderland Club. He was deeded 50 acres of this land with the promise to develop the land. And though he made good on that promise, building the Wonderland Park Hotel, he ended up selling it just after 7 years. For the first few years, the hotel was actually a real hotel, housing wealthy people who wanted a vacation in the Smoky Mountain area. After the Wonderland Hotel was sold, it became a membership-only hotel and was closed to the public until the 1970s, when it was reopened again for a short time. Though no matter how much clout and political power the wealthy club owners had, it was only a matter of time before the town would become a shadowy ghost of its former glory. The railroads not only closed in 1925, but were actually torn out by the company. And though the two clubs worked together to make the old railways into the road we now know as the Little River Road, as well as use their clout to work around the laws and keep their doors open, there was little they can do once the federal government took hold of the lands. In 1926, the National Park Services took over ownership of the lands that Daisy Town was built on, and the Smoky Mountain National Park was established. And unlike other national parks in the same situation, the state of North Carolina and Tennessee needed to buy the land from the owners. An agreement was eventually reached with Elkmont residents in 1932, whereby landowners would receive a lifetime lease in return for the sale of their property at half of appraised value. And though the inhabitants of the town weren't kicked out per se, new rules and the leases and regulations made it impossible for the town to really grow anymore. Initially, the government allowed people a lifelong lease on the property the clubs owned, which changed to a 20-year lease once the government put in electricity. With little incentive to stay, most homeowners finally gave up and left, leaving the buildings behind to be taken over by the forest to rot and decay. When the final lease extension closed out in 1992, the last resident and caretaker, J.T. Higdon, was finally asked to move out, and Daisy Town became the Elkmont Ghost Town. In its heyday, over 80 different structures and buildings were erected for the members of the two social clubs. But by the early 2000s, many of the buildings that had stood until then had fallen into severe disrepair and derelict. And though many people were pushing for the park to restore the buildings and preserve some of the past, it wasn't an easy thing to do, as many of the buildings were beyond repair, and the cost was not cheap to fix them. On top of that, there was the fact that most of them had been basically cobbled together. Original floor plans and ways to preserve the buildings were not as easy to figure out as you would think. And while the fight was on to begin the restoration of these buildings, many of them became unsalvageable. The National Park Service eventually got the planning and funding in place and began the restoration process. Unfortunately, one of the most iconic structures that had been built as a historic site, the Wonderland Park Hotel, needed to be torn down due to a fire and decay. Of the 80-some buildings that existed, only 19 were in good enough condition to revitalize and preserve. The 19 survivors were the last of the bustling Daisy Town and reminders of the times bygone. When you arrive at Daisy Town, there's a small parking area right before you get to the area with most of the houses. This is a one-way road, but if there isn't a function or event happening at the Appalachian House, you should be able to park there as well. You will also be able to park at the lower level, closer to the campgrounds, and just walk up the short drive to the town. Keep in mind that you will need a park pass when staying in the park. These passes are available online at the Sugarland Visitor Center and many of the other larger attractions in the mountains. If you're parking by the campsite, a good place to start your exploration is at the site of the Wonderland Park Hotel. Or should I say the ruins of the hotel? The only thing that remain are the chimney, foundation, and staircase, which can be found up near the campgrounds. There wasn't much to salvage after the fire, and the few items that could be salvaged were removed and are being held hostage by the National Park Services until they can find a way to put them on display or whatever they plan on doing with them. There is also the Elkmont Cemetery near the campgrounds. You can find an easy trail to this historic cemetery up behind the campgrounds. It isn't far from the main area. If you park in the Jakes Creek parking area, you'll have closer access to the main buildings as well as a chance to explore the ruins of more demolished structures along the Jakes Creek Trail. The Wonderland Park Hotel isn't the only building that needed to be demolished. As you follow Jakes Creek, you'll also discover a graveyard of chimneys from buildings that had to be pulled down and demolished. I remember the first time we walked that path and I thought they were the remains of old loggers, but apparently they were more structures that were part of the social club built in that area. From the Jakes Trailhead parking area, you will also see more of the revived buildings. These buildings are clustered together. When you look at them, it looks like a quaint little neighborhood with stone cobble walkways, stairs, and walls that help separate and define the borders between houses and the road itself. And though it looks like a middle-class neighborhood in the south, keep in mind that this road was sometimes referred to as Millionaire Row due to the high profile of people who put in these rustic-looking cabins. By our standards today, this place looks like a rustic backcountry getaway, not a luxury resort for the rich and famous. It's actually pretty hard to get facts about most of the buildings as you walk around. Either they just haven't started putting up information signs, or the National Park Services plan on leaving things as they are. The only way to really learn anything about the buildings when you're there is if you talk with the park ranger or take a guided tour using companies like the Pink Jeep Tours. But the park rangers have a plethora of knowledge and are more than happy to talk with guests, and it doesn't cost anything to talk to them. Google Maps doesn't really do much of a good job at identifying the houses either. They each have a number, and a few of the houses actually do have names. I was able to find a map on WBIR Channel 10's Facebook that had all of the cabins labeled. When doing my research on Elkmonk, I learned that specific information about the houses was hard to do. Yes, there are books and such on the town, but my goal was to find information that the general population could find online as well. One example is the Levy Trentham Cabin, I think I said that right, which was owned by a prominent figure in the early history of Elkmont, who owned and lived in this cabin for many years. Trentham was known for his involvement in the logging industry, and was one of the key figures in the development of Elkmont. His cabin serves as a residence and gathering place for locals, offering a glimpse into the rustic lifestyle of early settlers in the area. Another house of significance is the Sneed home. The house was built in 1910 by Weston Miller Fulton Sr., shortly after his marriage to his wife Barbara. He was a meteorologist, inventor, and prominent industrialist in Knoxville. This house is very distinct in its construction and quite beautiful inside and out. Like many of the homes, the kitchen in the back was added after its construction. There is actually significant information about many of the dwellings that went under construction by the park. Whole documentations that highlight the house's history, who leased them, what condition they were in, and when construction started, and much more information. You just had to do a little digging. Most of the information I found were in public records that the National Park Service published. Another building report I looked at was the Hale Cabin. It was reportedly constructed by the Luttrell family at about 1914. The Appalachian Club transferred the property, known as Lot Number 10, to Sam C. House in 1919. House was part of a prominent Knoxville family and was a traveling salesman for two of the Knoxville's leading hardware businesses. Perhaps one of the most charming constructions is the Adamless Eden. This quaint little building was part of the Addicks cabin construction. The Adamless Eden structure was built by W.B. Townsend for his daughter, Margaret. Unlike the Addicks house, which was a pre-constructed house designed to be built off-site and plopped down for easy construction, the Adamless Eden was clearly built for his young child. The scale of the windows, doors, and the detailing makes it a fun building to explore and imagine in. But one detail that persists in all these buildings is a sense of patchwork construction. Though many of the buildings were actually prefabricated structures, it's clear that the owners added to the structure over time. You will almost always find the kitchen in the back, since they were added later and not really part of the original design. It's also not hard to see where rooms seem to be patched on or an extension added here or there. Ironically, the Gaylan Clubhouse that is standing today is one of the newest structures built in the 1930s, after the original one burned down in 1925. The Gaylan Clubhouse was the heart of the town. Since it had a full kitchen and was originally designed to host large groups of people, it made sense that it was used to serve meals, had a large hearth for big gatherings, and was the center of the community. And it still is used today for similar reasons. Guests can actually still rent out the building for private events and gatherings. So it's one of the few buildings hard to get inside photos because it's locked down or access isn't available when being rented out. The Spencer Cabin, which is behind the Gaylan Clubhouse, was also a highlighted building and one everyone should try and see. The Spencer House was built in 1928 as a vacation home for Alice Townsend, wife of Colonel Townsend, who owned both the Little River Lumber Company and the Little River Railroad. It's currently the only building in Daisytown that people can rent and stay in. It has a functional kitchen, heating, and bathrooms. Bridal parties often rent both buildings for weddings, but it can be used for other large events. This building was also one of the 19 buildings resurrected and restored to the original plan. I guess we know why it's pink. Guess it was the ladies' favorite color. Either way, it's a lovely cabin with big windows that let in plenty of light and lots of rooms for guests, and it's situated in a great location with an amazing picturesque cobble platform that overlooks the Little River in the back. However, unless you're staying here or renting, getting photos of the building from the inside can be a little difficult. If you plan on visiting Daisytown, I would consider trying to go in late spring or early fall. The weather is more agreeable and also the public restrooms are open. There are 2 public restroom stations in the Elkmont camp area close to the town. There is one and another one that's actually at the campsite. The bathrooms are closed in the winter, which kind of sucks, but what can you do? Keep in mind that you also need to get a parking pass to stay there. Many people ask if it's worth the trip. I mean, calling it a ghost town is a little misleading. I admit it was on my list of must-sees when I first started visiting the park in 2020. I've gone in the summer, winter, and fall, and by far my favorite time is the fall. So beautiful. But is there enough to see and do for the entire day? That depends on if you plan on taking any of the trails or short hikes in the area. The town itself is pretty small, and unless you're a total Smoky Mountains historian geek or love old architecture, it isn't going to take very long to walk through. I would suggest making Elkmont a part of a larger trip. On the way down, maybe go to Laurel Falls or head over to Meigs Falls. Many people also enjoy stopping at the sinks and enjoy seeing the water as you follow the Little Gorge River. There are numerous trails and things that you can see and enjoy in the area. I hope this video helps you plan your visit to the Smoky Mountain National Park. Please note that we at Fairfax do not get paid for our videos. You're getting an honest review of our personal experiences. But facts and things change, so please let us know if you learn anything new and want to share your experiences in the comments. Thanks again for visiting us at Fairfax of the Smoky Mountains. Please click that like button and subscribe to our channel.